When people talk about video games, it's usually not a thorough discussion about the techniques and methods used in their creation, or their artistic contribution to society. In fact, the debate still reigns about whether or not this particular medium should be considered art at all. While many praise its ability to actively involve and immerse its audience, others find it simplistic and debasing to the art community.
Die, Clanner. He's going critical.
Now, throughout the course of our class, we have looked into various representations of the evolution of art and how creativity was intertwined within, how styles moved from one period to the next and incorporated previous aspects as well as attempting to create new ones. Art, in and of itself, has had millennia to evolve and form, and we now have centuries worth of material that we can look back on for inspiration. But while games have been able to draw from art both past and present, they have suffered a different limitation, that of technology. As I pondered how each medium had developed itself, I began to notice patterns between them, and believe that video games may have gone through a very similar evolution, just over a much shorter period of time. Like so many mediums before it, video games started simple, with abstract figures in abstract worlds, the easiest thing that could be drawn and moved, a striking resemblance to some prehistoric art. As time went by, programmers became more experienced, hardware became more capable, and things started to take off. Color was introduced, and more complex figures took shape, but gaming really didn't reach its heyday until sometime around 1985, with the release of the popular Nintendo Entertainment System. Here it began its rise in popularity, and with it, the rush to make it better. Viable shapes took form, figures became easy to understand, and it laid down the foundations for all future platforms that preceded it. Now, here is where we start with the true comparisons. The classical age of art, at the start of the Renaissance, strove to mimic the precedents set about by early Greece and Rome, and improve upon them. In essence, this is exactly what happened with the next generation of gaming systems. Taking the most popular tips from the previous generations, the early 90s saw mini-games reimagined and improved, even if the foundations remained the same. Shading became a use for dramatic effect and emphasis. Perspective was put into place, with greater detail given to backgrounds, but still, the games remained largely the same. Gameplay changed little between the two generations, and both were limited to two-dimensional sprites played across a two-dimensional plane. And while there were some forays into the realm of three dimensions, the current generation just did not have sufficient capability to make it happen on a grand scale, so they stuck with what worked best for the time. With the arrival of the Baroque period, the classical style was given a sense of flair. Details became a prominent feature, with special care given to art to make it more expressive and lifelike. Shading and lighting were given an even greater emphasis, along with texture and color, and emotion took a front stage. After 6 years of the limitations of the fourth generation of gaming consoles, the fifth generation made its debut and became the next big breakthrough as technology once again improved to grant a greater range of capability to the market. With more power, greater care could be taken to add details to games that would have been far too demanding for earlier technology. Characters were given more fluid movement and even facial expressions to enhance the experience. Lighting and special effects became the next great theme, and the virtual world moved more fully into the third dimension, so much so that one of the main competitors of the gaming market made it extremely difficult for developers to publish games on their system if they were not developed in 3D. Now, all of this would change the face of gaming from here on out, but it would also change its evolution cycle. While art seemed to evolve gradually, moving from one phase to the next over decades, gaming from this point evolved simultaneously. Technology had finally caught up with the developers' imaginations, and they were learning to do with it whatever they wanted. When the Rococo artists first started, they initially worked with what was popular at the time and expanded on it. Most of their reference material came from the Baroque period, and so they used it. In a similar vein, the next generation of gaming took what became established in the previous generation and made it better. Where Rococo emphasized beauty and leisure, these new games had a similar and yet all too different emphasis: graphics. The Rococo used muted colors and soft lines. Video games began to take on more detail and adopt a brown hue. Lines were nearly eliminated entirely, as the three-dimensional models no longer needed them. Another similarity between the two was their sudden appeal to the masses. It was during this time in early to mid-2000s that games were no longer targeted towards a select few, but were thrown at the world population en masse. It was no longer nerds and outcasts that played them. Everyone played them, just as everyone began to enjoy the works of the Rococo artists. It was to give the impression that they were living a life beyond their own. At the same time that most game developers were pushing forward with leaps and bounds, there began to be an outcry amongst the older gamers, many of whom missed the simplicity of the games of old. Thus began an age of nostalgia. Much like the neoclassical style of art, which was little more than a throwback to the classical styles of the early Renaissance, modern developers began to take the technology of the day and churn out games that were direct throwbacks to the games of old. Whether in style, graphically, or both, these games were efforts to appease those who had grown up with video games and did not like the direction the new games were headed. They brought back the bold colors to offset the brown worlds of the modern games. They brought back sprites and gameplay from 10 years past. This trend continues even today, and many developers have gone so far as to take advantage of this niche by making their older games available through the advent of the internet, much to the pleasure of those who remember them. Each style of art seems to have its place within the video game world. Impressionism can be easily linked with the small, independent developers that wish to generate a better relationship with their audience, without the panache of most big-name publishers, by inciting creativity in gameplay to collect their interest. Surrealism is a genre all on its own, with games that love to play with the heads of their audience.
To remove your brain and make it shoot down innocent civilians with its concentrated psychic death beam! The good news is that your insurance is going to cover the whole thing.
Currently, most mainstream games would probably be described as reminiscent of the Romantic period. Hoping to shoulder off the stigma that they created with the oversaturation of brown hue in recent years, many game developers now place their characters in new locales and settings, involving much more color. Lush jungles and tropical islands have become a favorite background, and science fiction settings provide an opportunity to paint grand landscapes within the vastness of the unknown. Emotions have also become a staple of today's games, with games that purposefully tweak their interface with the gamer or leave their protagonist silent amidst a rather talkative populace to give the gamer the opportunity to imprint himself within the game.
Gordon, you're a real terror. Think it's dead? Maybe you should whack it with a crowbar just in case.
Also similar to the Romantic period is the fact that many modern games go straight for shock value, as genres such as survival horror have increased in popularity, all with the intent that the gamer himself feels more than a passing connection with their chosen form of entertainment. Whether rescuing a damsel in distress in the castle yonder, or plotting the fall of an evil dictator, games today want their participants to be actively connected to the story. Where games go from here is anyone's guess, but whether or not you see them as a form of art, it cannot be denied that art as we know it has had a great influence on the shape and form that games have developed. And in this, they have ensured their own little place in history.